I'm Adam Pascarella, and welcome to episode 34 of The Power of Bold.
From New York City, it's The Power of Bold, the podcast on risk-taking, entrepreneurship, and bold living. Join us as we interview world-class performers, analyze life-changing books, and gather actionable insights to help you achieve your goals. Here's your host, Adam Pascarella.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to this latest episode of The Power of Bold. I hope everyone is gearing up for a great Thanksgiving weekend. My Michigan Wolverines are taking on the Ohio State Buckeyes in a huge college football game, so I'm especially excited for that. But before we get to Thanksgiving weekend, I want to share my latest conversation. I recently spoke with Adam Kreek, an Olympic gold medalist and world-class athlete, who once joined several others on an unprecedented effort to row a small boat from the west coast of Africa all the way to Miami, Florida. Just to give a little more background about Adam, he is from Canada and started rowing at a fairly young age. He kept getting better and better and earned some of the most prestigious awards in the sport, including gold medals at the Royal Henley Regatta, the World Rowing Cup, and the World Rowing Championships. Adam reached the pinnacle of the sport by representing Canada in the 2004 and 2008 Summer Olympics, winning the gold medal in the men's 8 competition at the 2008 Beijing Games. So obviously, Adam is an extremely decorated rower, and after 2008, he was looking for new challenges. With 3 friends, Adam decided to take on a gigantic challenge, one in fact that had never been done before. Adam and his 3 friends decided to try making the first attempt to row from mainland Africa to North America. 73 days into the journey, a rogue wave hit their ship, causing it to capsize in the Bermuda Triangle. Adam and his friends were ultimately rescued, and their story is explained further in an NBC Dateline documentary titled Capsized. Now, Adam is a management consultant, executive coach, and motivational speaker who speaks about his career and the lessons that he learned while competing at the highest levels and while surviving in the Atlantic Ocean. Adam is an elite athlete and has persevered through extremely competitive and difficult circumstances. But having said that, Adam has a collection of unique insights that apply to each of our lives, even if we aren't competing for a gold medal or trying to survive after our boat has capsized. In our conversation, Adam and I discussed things like how he approaches difficult decisions, the inherent challenges after a significant failure or a significant success, Adam's attitude toward risk, and the importance of preparation when facing a devastating incident in our lives. So without further ado, let's get to my discussion with Adam Kreek. Adam Kreek, thanks for being here on The Power of Bold.
Oh, it's great to be here. With another Adam, nonetheless.
I know, you're the first Adam guest on this podcast. This is quite an accomplishment here. Well, I've got to say that I first heard of you from my sister, who saw you share your story at her job, and she really raved about it and the insights from what you experienced. And after reading up on you and your background, I know that the listeners here will feel the same. So there's a lot that we can get to in this conversation, but I'd like to focus on some of the more challenging parts of your life and how you overcame the obstacles in front of you. And so this podcast is about helping listeners take smart and calculated risks. And often this involves overcoming some fear that's in the back of our minds. And perhaps if a listener was to look at your Wikipedia page or your biography, they may think, wow, this person really enjoys risk. He likes pushing himself to his limits. So if we could possibly start there, would you agree with that statement? How do you generally look at risk?
Well, I don't really see myself as I guess a risky person or a thrill seeker, or maybe I've heard people describe me as a risk seeker before, and I think I'm more of I look for peace, to be honest with you, and it's actually kind of incredible that I've found a unique version of just being present and feeling at peace in some of these high performance situations as an Olympic athlete, or you're competing at the World Championships. You're at the starting line, and your body's just cursing with, adrenaline and performance hormones, or some of the wilderness adventures that I've undertaken. Obviously, when you're going to the extremes, there is a strong element of risk that is involved. But if you plan effectively and you're smart about it, then that risk is actually mitigated and minimized. And you've actually, kind of pay that tax. You pay kind of this tax of risk and this tax of fear, and you're actually able to live a life that's more authentic and more fulfilling. So I guess I have taken risks in my life, but I would say that I don't take risks for the thrill of the risk. I take risks for the outcome, which is more peace and feeling like I'm living a life that's more true to who I am as an individual.
That's really interesting. And what you said there sort of reminded me of Alex Honnold, who's the free solo climber. He came out with a documentary recently about his free solo of El Capitan in Yosemite.
Oh, yeah.
It's Yosemite, I think.
I was reading about that.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I haven't seen the movie, but I've heard him talk about that feat. And he said, or I think someone asked him, "Oh, you're a risk taker. Are you really nervous when you're on the wall?" And he said, "Actually, no. I'm at the most calm. If I'm nervous, then something has gone horribly wrong." He's practiced and he's prepared his entire life to do something like that. And so it sounds like that's sort of similar to what you were saying, just that, yes, you accept risk as part of your journey, but it's in the pursuit of peace. Am I sort of on the right track there, or would you say that's accurate?
Oh, yes. And it's, I think of this climber. I forget, what was his name?
Alex Honnold.
Yeah, Alex Honnold. And just reading about the stuff that he did, it's risky to try to be really good at something. And you look at this, obviously there's death. Death is on the line. If he takes one wrong step, he's off the wall and he's down, which is really kind of crazy when you think about it. Mm-hmm. But at the same point in time, when I could picture him being in the moment, in this ideal state of flow where he's climbing up this wall and nothing else matters except this climb at this moment. And so often, we find ourselves in moments where we feel, latent fear, which is thinking about other possible outcomes. But I think he would be fearless in that pursuit because he's so well prepared and so confident to be in that moment. And I think that's, when I think of rowing across the ocean or going to the Olympics or even running my own business or coaching other people who run their own businesses, it's about mitigating risk in a way that you feel confident to be who you are in the present. You have the skills and you have the ability to execute.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with all of that. And I guess going back to, someone looking at your Wikipedia page or your bio. So say if someone reads it and thinks, "Oh, I'm not that big of a risk taker or an adventurer or an excellent athlete like you are. And maybe because of this, I'm somewhat skeptical about how I can relate to Adam and his story." How would you respond to people that think that? I'm sure you've come across people like that in your consulting and speaking career.
Well, my first response is I don't have to reach everybody.
Yeah.
I can't relate to everybody out there because everybody there's so many different variabilities in personalities and life experience. But again, if I look at my career as a keynote speaker and where it's moved towards as a management consultant, I've done my best to take the lessons of sport and adventure and apply them to someone's journey throughout business and life. And what I think, one of the the questions I would ask is, do you want to live a life that's insipid? Or do you want to live a life that's bold? Mm-hmm. And I feel like I've lived my life moving away from the insipid. And I like the word insipid. We don't use it that often, but it's insipid. If something is insipid, like it lacks vigor or interest, and say an artist might churn out a shallow or an insipid work of art. Whereas boldness, you think of that saying, fortune favors the bold. A person can be bold, an action can be bold, an idea can be bold. And it's about showing an ability to take risks, be confident, and be courageous. And, being bold, having a bold attempt to solve a crisis. And myself, when I was younger, my dream, to be honest with you, was to grow up and become an accountant.
Oh, really? Interesting.
So when I was in high school, that's what I thought I would do. And that's what I thought I would be. I'd be an accountant that would ride his bike, to and from work. I like being outside. And I thought, being an accountant is something that's productive and it's reasonable. And in high school, I played a bunch of different sports. And my high school rowing coach, he said, "Hey, Adam, Kreek, you're an Olympian. You just don't know it yet. You have this potential to go to the Olympics." And I remember him telling me that, and I was just filled with terror. I was filled with fear because that was, one, it was presented as an opportunity, but two, there's no guarantee. That was 13 years before I won Olympic gold. So that's a long, long journey. And to think of yourself 10 years, 15 years in the future is kind of terrifying because a lot can change.
Sure.
And so, yeah.
Yeah, but so before that point, did you even think you would do this professionally? This coach was the catalyst for your change of thought?
He was the catalyst for my change of thought. He presented this as an opportunity, as something I could do well at. But it was also, like I said, it was also terrifying. Yeah. Because I couldn't, you can't predict the future. And the question came down, do I want to live a life that is, mildly insipid, or do you want to live a life that's bold? Do you want to live a life lacking vigor or interest, or do you want to live a life that, takes some risks in pursuit of potential and best opportunity? And that was, that was the choice that I made. And I think that's the choice that most of us are wired to make. There's some people who just want to take the safe route, and that's totally fine. But if you're feeling unhappy or unsure, in your life, usually you're contemplating some kind of change, and we need to have that, that courage, to take the leap.
For sure. And I love this emphasis on boldness. The podcast is called The Power of Bold. And there's really no, but there's a serendipity here. that is the atoms, the boldness, there's a lot of, like I named the podcast, there's power in taking control over your life and really avoiding inertia. I think inertia is one of the most dangerous things that we can succumb to, and it's so easy to succumb to that. And so, yeah, that's this ability to really at least acknowledge your fears and sort of master them, navigate them, and take boldness over your life is truly the way to go. And if I could just quickly ask you, what was it about rowing compared to other sports? You said you were an athlete in high school. You presumably did other things.
Oh, yeah, I did other things. I played the tuba and the trumpet. And then I played basketball and football. I had the opportunity to get scholarships at a number of schools in the States for football. But for some reason, so I'd say I didn't have extreme success at the other sports. I did track and field as well, through the discus and the shot put. But it really came down to, I had strong potential in football and rowing. And it was within the span of a week, I was trying to make the decision, which sport should I invest more time in? And to be honest, I originally started rowing get stronger for football. When I was
really?
a kid, I watched football with my dad on the couch, and I liked the sport, and it was just something that it had attracted me. But then I was in grade 11 or grade 12, and I was over at a friend's house, and his dad comes in the door with a walker. His dad's not that old; he's in his 40s or 50s, and he's coming in with this walker. And so, "Oh, what's wrong with you?" He's like, "Oh, I just got my knees replaced. It's an old football injury." And I'm looking at him, and then later that week, I'm down at the rowing club, and there's this 85-year-old German immigrant. His name is Otto Schwinten, and comes to the boathouse, and he picks up this long 29-foot single shell off the boat rack, and he walks down to the river, down these giant steps, and puts it in. And I see him go for a row, and I think, do I want to be like this 45-year-old guy with a walker, or this 85-year-old guy who's still rowing now? And for me, that was the turning point, where I said, look at this sport. This is a sport that I can pick up, and it's something I can have for life. It's something I can do for life. And to be honest, although I don't row at an international level, and I'm not rowing across oceans, I still hop in rowboats, and I take my kids crab fishing, or I hop in a master's boat and take a run down a course. And it's something I'll continue to do. I even go out with, I call it old man rowing. It started out tongue in cheek, but even now I hop in boats with guys who are well into their 70s, and I'm totally inspired by them. Just to say, hey, look, you recognize that this sport is part of your time on the planet, and it's also staying healthy and fit is part of you being successful in your career and your life. And I'm totally inspired by these guys who are 75 years old and still hauling on their oar.
Yeah, that's really, really amazing stuff. And so at that earlier point when you're deciding, I'd like to kind of get into how you make decisions. So you're contemplating football and rowing. Were you passionate about both of them? Are you a big believer in following your passion when you're debating two pretty closely tied things like that, if you have to choose one over the other?
I'm a bigger believer in purpose. Mm-hmm. If we're talking about, do you follow your passion? I feel like you can follow your passion, or you can follow your purpose. And if you follow your passion, in my experience, when I've listened to my passion and I watch my passion changes over time. It has, there's ups and downs, and I'm riding a roller coaster when I'm listening to my passion itself, because at times the passions can be very, very powerful and can drive you forward and have a lot of energy. And other times the passions can be gone, and I'll feel depressed or demotivated and don't want to move forward. But when I think about purpose, of thinking, what are my innate skills and talents, and what do I feel like I've been placed on this planet for, and what's my personality inclination? And when I start thinking about these things, I'm reminded of my purpose, and I have energy to go through the pit of pain or the pit of patience, and do the hard work necessary to get the results. Mm-hmm. And so when I was thinking about, should I go for football or should I go for rowing, on a higher level, I felt like my purpose was to be a rower more than it was to be more than to be a football player. Mm-hmm. And if I were to listen to what coaches said around me, I had coaches say, yeah, you could be a great university football player, or head coaches who'd say, yeah, you could go to the Olympics. And for me, the idea of the Olympics sounded that much more compelling.
Of course. And so when you're thinking about your purpose, were you more methodical about it? Did you like journal? Did you take more active steps in discovering that, or was it more of a subconscious process?
Well, I've journaled off and on since I was a teenager, and so after high school, let's go back in kind of like a biographical timeline. So after high school, I decided that I didn't want to play football, nor did I want to row. I wanted to go work, and I wanted to go work on the oil rigs and work hard outdoors, get muddy, make money. And I moved to the north of Alberta, and that gave me time to think about what I actually wanted to do. And sitting down, writing through my thoughts in one of these trailer camps up in the frozen muskeg in northern Alberta, I came to the conclusion that there's a lot of unfinished potential within the sport of rowing that I just needed to pursue. I needed to see how far I could take rowing, and the decision didn't seem too hard for me to choose between rowing and football. The decision was, do I lean into rowing, or do I lean into like making money and doing that next part of life? Because rowing was a very frivolous pursuit.
Right. And so ultimately you do choose your rowing career, a great decision. And you're clearly a decorated rower. You've won multiple gold medals in things like the World Rowing Cup, the World Rowing Championships, and the Royal Henley Regatta. But you also, like you said, participated in 2 Olympics in 2004 and 2008, and you won the gold medal in the men's eights in the 2008 Olympics. And we could talk about your rowing career for the entire episode, but I guess I'd like to focus on the Olympics themselves. Can you give the listeners a sense of your experience there, not just the athletic part, but everything around it?
Well, there were 2 Olympics, and they were very different from one another, and there were some similarities too. The first Olympics, I came in as I rowed in the men's 8, one of 9 people in a boat. There's 8 rowers and a coxswain, and the first Olympics we came into was we were the favorites. We hadn't lost a race in 2.5 years, and we just got nicked out. Again, I'm Canadian, so we got nicked out by the Americans by less than a second in the heats. And the Americans beat the world record time, and we beat the world record time too. But obviously the Americans won, so they got a direct bye into the final. And then in our repechage, which is kind of the second chance heat to get into the final, our stroke man had an injury. And when we got to the final, our boat just fell apart. We cracked, and we had the proverbial choke. We finished in 5th place, and it was crushing, and it was depressing, and there was a lot of self-doubt and self-questioning that came after that, because again, this is the downside of being bold, or sort of the fear of being bold, right?
Yeah,
when you take risk and it doesn't work out, is it still worth it?
Exactly. And so how did you answer that question back at that time?
Well, this was my existential problem that I had, that it probably took me a year or 2 to work through and to solve and again justify in in retrospect. But for me, I feel like there's when you set a goal and you set to achieve a goal, there's that main goal that you're in pursuit of. And by pursuing that goal, you accrue a lot of what I like to call cluster benefits. So, for example, in pursuit of the Athens Olympic the Athens Olympic race, there were a lot of benefits that I was able to gain in pursuit of that goal. I became a better leader. I got a cultural education. I got to travel all over the world. I understood more about human physiology. I ended up getting a scholarship to Stanford University and got the chance to study down there. I developed a lot of different skills along the way. Some of these less quantifiable skills that are, leadership skills, I suppose, would be a better descriptor of that are that come with the pursuit of sport.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting. Well,
go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, but I was saying it's interesting because there is a letdown after failing, but there's also a letdown after succeeding as well. And, I think I said it to you before we started this conversation, but success isn't final and failure isn't fatal. It's the courage to continue that counts. And I think that has been the biggest lesson I've had on my sporting journey, because having faced taking the risk and facing failure, it was upsetting, because I had thought that, I would have an immense amount of opportunity placed before me by winning the Olympic gold medal, and life would just be, easy no matter what, having it. And all of a sudden, we messed up and we lost it. And I said, you know what? Even though I didn't get it, I got all these different benefits from it. And then, after winning the Olympic gold medal, it was an incredible experience. And don't get me wrong, your nerves are high, and then you exact your volition on the sporting world, and you come out on top, and it's a great day of celebrating, and you make really good friendships along the way. But then, the day after, life's not over. You still have to work on something. You still need a goal. You still need to do, you still need to work hard at something, and life is going to present you challenges, regardless of where you are. And the success wasn't necessarily final after the Beijing Games. I needed other goals, I needed other challenges to keep me motivated, and that's what spawned the building this project to row across the ocean.
Right.
And then from that's what built my business coaching and management consulting career. Everything sort of builds on one another. You just got to keep moving forward, keep grinding.
Exactly. Did you find it more difficult bouncing back from that first failure, or I guess metaphorically bouncing back from the success? I mean, which one was tougher for you?
Well, I'd say bouncing back from the first failure was harder than bouncing back from the success. Mm-hmm. And partially because I was aware of the downfalls of success after seeing people who had been successful at the previous Olympic Games and seeing them struggle with their success. It was a kind of an acknowledgement that it's not all about the win. It's not all about that end point. Life is about so much more. As trite as that sounds, it's about the relationships we build along the way, and it's about the process of the journey. It's the journey of attainment. It's not the attainment itself that really matters, and it's the character that we develop and how we grow over time that really leaves an impact.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. I guess in just some circumstances, though, it seems like it's so easy to obsess over the outcome, what we want. And even though we know that it's really about the journey and about how you go about doing it, it's still, the outcome is still central in some people's minds. So what advice would you give for those people? Like, are there any tips to make it?
Well, the outcome does matter. Let's be clear. And I'm not saying the outcome does not matter. It's almost a yin and yang of achievement. There's the yin part, which is it's all about the personal development, it's all about the journey, and then there's the yang part, which is it's all about the result. You got to get the result. And let's be honest, we are judged by the results we deliver. Like, for example, when I go, and this is my world right now, and in the consulting world, if I get a client and I run them through a change management workshop and they don't get the results they want, which is more people on board with the change management profile and people feeling more motivated and having a better sense of what the new change is happening within their organization, then one, they're going to be unhappy. Two, I won't get more work.
Right.
And
yeah.
Not going to be able to continue doing, the work that I love. And I think we have to acknowledge that failure is really, really bad. And we all know the platitudes. And as even one of the guys I was coaching, I coach as an executive coach. He had a big real estate deal that fell through, and he lost hundreds of millions of dollars. And I'm walking him through the process of dealing with failure, as I've seen it. And he's saying, it's easy enough to talk about the platitudes of a failure, but when you're actually living it and you're feeling it, it doesn't feel like it's going to end, and it's really it's not pleasurable. Mm-hmm. Like it really, 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 really sucks. But it's important to recognize that the psychological depths that we go into, or the doubts that we're exploring, or the pain that we're experiencing, is almost like fertilizer. It fertilizes the ground of the mind for the next leap forward, for the next spark of hope.
Mm-hmm. And that's what you told him. Just say this: you can learn from this failure. You can use it to springboard your next opportunity.
Yeah, or it wouldn't even be that. It would be like, what have you learned from this, and what have you taken away from this? And we went through a couple of processes. One was just there's a group in Victoria. They run fuck up nights, where people come in and they talk about the biggest mistake that they've made professionally. Mm-hmm. And so we went and organized him to go speak at an event where he just shared his failure in a kind of in a motivational way, to say, hey, look, I went through this process and this is what I learned through my failure. And hopefully you can avoid your failures by learning these lessons. He said, well, that was actually useful, because part of the lie of failure is that we feel like we've gained no benefit and we've gained no advantage from this process. We feel like we've lost it all. And we're now, we're now hopeless.
Yeah.
But through the process, even this guy's story, he went and he built a big development, and he found a new form of real estate financing in the process. And even though he lost this development, he's been able to incorporate this new financing process into the new projects that he's undertaking. And he's been having really good success with it now. But it's taken, it's taken six years past the big downfall to get back to this point where success is again on the horizon.
Right. So it's just having patience as well, just keeping keeping your nose to the grindstone and keeping working. If I can just ask you here, obviously you alluded to it. You had this experience rowing from Africa to North America, specifically Florida. I think you left from Senegal with 4 people in a rowboat, and you wanted to row all the way to Florida. And NBC's Dateline even made it the subject of a documentary, and I'm going to link to it on the show notes so listeners can check it out. And so it's such an untraditional and bold adventure, going back to this idea of boldness. And so I guess I'll start with the obvious question. How did you come up with this idea?
How did I come up with the idea? I was looking for a way to stay engaged with the sport after Olympic rowing was done. And I was in that transition period. I was starting a small company on Vancouver Island where I live. And I was going into these weekend rowing races, almost like a beer league rowing race. You go out and you race around some buoys, and you come back and you have a barbecue and a beer, and you meet a bunch of people who like hopping in dory boats or funny looking rowing boats, and you connect with them. I ended up going down to San Francisco, and I did this race underneath the Golden Gate Bridge out of Sausalito, and then back in. And I met this guy, Jordan Hansen, who had rowed across the North Atlantic. He had rowed from New York to England. And meeting him at that race was engaging. He was just one of those people we instantly connected. And before I had met him and before I had spoken to him, I had no desire whatsoever to go across an ocean or spend time out there. But after meeting with him and hearing about his experiences, I thought, you know what, this is something that I think I'd like to do. I think this is something that could be a lot of fun. And although it has risks associated with it, there's many ways to mitigate those risks. And by being smart about this process, we could have a great time in the ocean. And at the end of the day, it's like a camping trip with 3 of your buddies in the wilderness. And if you're willing to pay the tax of these risks, you have some very unique and connective and special moments.
Yeah, absolutely, and you certainly did. We'll get to those in a second. But when you were first thinking of the idea, sharing it with friends and family, I'm assuming that some of them maybe looked at you funny, were thinking, "What the heck were you doing?" How did you? I guess not overcome, but how did you deal with any objections that they had? Because a lot of times when people want to take risks, they receive this criticism or objections, and it stops them from actually taking the risk. How did you deal with that?
Well, I've got a great life partner, a wife, mother of my children, and business partner as well now. But first off, it was having a conversation with her, and she doesn't want me to die, obviously. Mm-hmm. But she also recognizes that, hey, wait a second, he wants to die even less than I want him not to die.
Yeah, of course.
Sense. I want to live more
mm-hmm.
because it's my body and my life.
Yeah.
And so her main concern was, can we do this? Can you do this safely? And we did a full risk analysis of what the risks were of rowing a boat across the ocean. And it turns out that it's more dangerous statistically riding a motorbike than it is rowing across an ocean.
Really?
Because once you say even capsize, you're still in the water, and there's rescue personnel around. It wouldn't be like massive, concussive
damage. Yeah.
Damage. Yeah. And the waves, and I follow a lot of these like big wave surfing people on Instagram, and some of the waves that you see that these big wave surfers are on, we didn't see stuff quite that big when we were out there. The waves were maybe at maximum 4 meters tall, which is about
like 8 to 10 feet, somewhere around there. Yeah. And so you looked at it logically, you discussed it with family members, and then you and your 3 friends go off on this little trip. And when you're getting started, can you take us back to the time when you actually set off? Were you excited, anxious? What were you thinking?
Well, this is a great metaphor, I think, even for anyone who's about to take the leap and jump off and to say, hey, I don't want to be a corporate lawyer anymore. I want to run my own dog walking business or whatever you've decided that you're going to do. But the first thing you do when you push off the ocean, and keep in mind, we had been planning for 4 years to get to this point. So there'd been a lot of planning, a lot of risk mitigating. There'd been a lot of trying to make sure that, do we have a plan in place for pirates? Do we have a plan in place for sharks? Do we have a plan in place in case we capsize? Do we have a plan in place in case freighters come? And understanding that we have all these, we had backups upon backups upon backups. So like, we didn't just decide that we were going to row across the ocean and 2 months later we pushed off. I want to be very clear that we took about 3.5, 4 years to do this properly.
Yeah.
But once you push off from the ocean, the first experience you have is, yes, we're doing this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so excited. And it's just this awesome feeling as you see Africa go away. There's this feeling of fear in the pit of your stomach where you think, okay, I'm not going to see land for 60 to 100 days. What's going to happen? This is exciting. Then around like day 3 to 8, you start to have blisters and open sores on your butt, and you start to get a little feeling seasick, and you might get some sunburn, and you're starting to feel uncomfortable. You're not sleeping very well, and that's the next phase where you're just starting to think, are you stupid man, you idiot. I hate this. I don't want to do this. And that's usually where, quitting happens. But you can't quit.
All four of you feel that?
All four of us.
Yeah.
We just didn't want to be there. And then when we kind of went through this next threshold where you're like, okay, I can do this and I can tolerate this and I can just survive. I'm a survivor. I can do this. And that's the next phase. And so you've gone from excitement to hate to survival. And the next one is just feeling normal, where all of a sudden everyone on the boat started around day 25 to 35 said, you know what, I can do this. This feels normal. Feels more than surviving. This just feels like an average boring day, mm-hmm. which was kind of like benign. It's amazing how much benignness there was on the ocean. I tell stories of the big waves and swimming with the whales and things like that. But most of your time on the ocean is pretty benign. But then after about day 36, 37, everyone had gone through this final threshold where they're thriving, where everyone all of a sudden felt like they were, I'm in my optimal living state. Mm-hmm. And this is great. Obviously I'm still burdened with 12 hours of rowing every day. I have scientific experiments that I have to do. I have communication responsibilities to our sponsors and the school children and some of our research associates on this boat. But here we are. We're in the middle of the ocean. This is amazing. We're doing it.
Yeah, of course. It's the new reality.
Yeah, it's the new reality. And all of a sudden it just became normal. It became exciting.
And then the non-normal happens. I believe it was 73 days into the journey when your boat capsized in the Bermuda Triangle. And as you were saying before, this wasn't non-expected. I guess the actually it happening wasn't expected, but you prepared for it. So at that time, I'm sure you were feeling fear, but can you take us back? Did the automatic contingency planning come into effect? Did training come into effect?
Yeah, well, we had trained. We went through some training off of Washington State, a place called Anacortes. Q3 ran us through some survival training beforehand in the Puget Sound. And it was around daybreak. We had just gotten into the Bermuda Triangle. We were about 8 to 10 days away from Miami, as we were 73 days in, and we had just gone through a crew change. So the guys from in the cabin had come on deck, and I had climbed in deck. Pat was coming in, brushing his teeth, when a funny wave comes. It lifts up our boat. It slams us to the side and rocks us over. And as the boat rocks over, it rocked over just far enough for another wave to come and just start filling the boat. And it filled the sleeping cabin within 10 seconds, instantly, just boom. I looked at Pat and I pushed him out, and then I was trapped in the sleeping cabin as it was flooding. And I ran out. I remember being trapped underwater, having run out of air. And I didn't think about this at the time, but thinking about my worst fear of rowing across the ocean, I'm not the strongest swimmer. Although I've spent my life on the water as a rower.
Yeah, staying in the boat.
I stay in the boat. And if my fear was to be trapped in the cabin as the boat was capsized upside down. So I was literally living my worst nightmare. And the funny thing happens that when you're actually, and this is the lesson of fear, when you're living your worst nightmare, it's far less scary than when you're imagining your worst nightmare. And so, there I was, trapped underwater. I pushed my hand up. There's an air pocket. So I pop my head up, take a breath, and you're existing right in, you're in animal state, animal thinking state. So there's no higher level thinking that's going on. It's more survival brain. And then you take another breath, and there's a blue light, and you swim towards this blue light. You pop yourself out. You climb on top of the boat, and you look around. And is everybody okay? Yes. Yeah. Are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay? Yes. One of the first conversations we had after the boat capsized was, do we want to press the emergency button? Do we want to take this button, which is they're PLBs, personal locator beacons, and do we want to be those guys who call for help, or should we just get ourselves out of this on our own? And I think we should push it. What do you think? Yeah, Jordan. Yeah. What do you think, Marcus? Yeah. What do you think, Pat? I already pressed the button.
Too late.
Yeah, too late. So there we were. And then about 5 hours after we capsized, the Coast Guard showed up in a C-130 airplane. And 13 hours after we capsized, they had diverted a couple boats, one being the Tanias Leader, the other one being the MV Hygiene. And the Hygiene came and picked us up and brought us to San Juan, Puerto Rico.
Wow, that's an incredible story. And I always ask my guests one insight that they can share from one of their life experiences, perhaps this or something else, even your consulting career, speaking with people in small or large organizations. One insight that listeners can implement right away, whether that's career advice, something else. So can you share something like that, whether that's from this particular incident or anything else?
Well, I think my insight will be a question. Do you want to live a life that's insipid, or do you want to live a life that's bold? And I think it's, and to be bold is to take the leap. And it's recognizing that life is all about forward motion. Life is all about, taking that next step of having a giant dream and working hard towards it and acting small, dreaming big, working hard, acting small. And by being bold, we're able to live a life that's more aligned with who we are as individuals, and less, live a life that's less of feeling trapped and feeling like we're pandering to what other people want of us or expect of us.
Yeah, I think that's super important, and you're clearly example number one of that. And I hope the listeners follow your lead and really embrace boldness and take ownership over what they want to do in their lives. So thank you again for sharing your incredibly inspiring story from the Olympics to the rowing from Africa to Florida. You've got some great stories. You're a great storyteller. And for any listeners that want to learn more about you or perhaps get in touch, where can they go?
Kreekspeak.com is my website. That's KreekSpeak.com, or I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter. LinkedIn is usually where I hang out professionally, and Twitter. I don't know that I do a whole lot on there. I post pictures of my workouts and my kids on Instagram too. so
any of those.
Yes, any of those.
Yeah, that's terrific.
Social media.
Well, Adam, thanks again for taking the time to share your story and your wisdom. We greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, it's always great to chat with another Adam.
Of course. Thank you so much. Once again, that was Adam Kreek, an Olympic gold medalist, an adventurer, and a current management consultant and executive coach. We only just touched on Adam's experience in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, so if you'd like to learn more about it, I'd highly recommend checking out Dateline's documentary of Adam's rowing adventure. You can still find it on the internet, and I'll link to it in the show notes. So that's it for this episode of The Power of Bold. As always, check out thepowerofbold.com for show notes and a transcript of this episode. We'd appreciate if you can give the show a review on iTunes or Google Play, and don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions or comments about the show. You can find us on social media channels, including Instagram now, or you can email me at adam@thepowerofbold.com. With all that said, I hope you have a great Thanksgiving, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Power of Bold. For show notes and a transcript of this episode, visit thepowerofbold.com. Feel free to get in touch by visiting our Facebook and Twitter pages. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or Google Play. We'll see you next time.